Hi, welcome to SHOWstudio. We're here today to talk about Gesquier for Balenciaga. Oh no, sorry, I was living in a fantasy dream world there. We are talking about Balenciaga today, and we'll start with our introductions, perhaps from the far end.
I'm John Michael O'Sullivan. I'm an architect and writer.
Hi, I'm Natascha Radclyffe-Thomas. I'm the course leader for fashion marketing at the London College of Fashion.
Hi, I'm James Chester. I'm an artist and manager at One of a Kind Archive.
I'm Charlotte Roberts. I'm a stylist and I run Mushfit magazine.
I'm Oriole Cullen. I'm a fashion curator at the V&A Museum.
And I'm Mactaggart, still hosting, haven't been fired yet, which is great news. So we're here to talk about Balenciaga, a very historic house, and I kind of wanted to evoke the original spirit of Balenciaga, talk a bit about Cristobal, and conjure up the kind of sound of flamenco, the kind of Spanish roots of the house. We were talking a little bit about looking back on the history of Balenciaga. I wondered if you wanted to join in about some of the stuff that the V&A is doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, we've been sort of looking back. My colleagues, Cassie Davis-Strotter, has been curating a show which opens in May on the craft of Balenciaga. So very much looking at sort of how he was pushing boundaries as a designer and how he's very much considered as a designer's designer. You know, that it's about kind of, you know, his approach to fashion. He was very low key. He didn't give interviews, and it was all focused on his work. And just sort of, I mean, I think we were saying earlier how that thread of him maybe being a maverick and sort of standing outside and proposing something different is maybe, you could say, something that you could see certainly with Nicolas Gesquier and potentially with Demna Gvasalia. So I think that from that sort of point of view, they're interesting designers, and that links back. But I don't know, that's just a personal opinion. But I think in terms of Cristobal Balenciaga, there's a lot of focus at the moment in Paris. Shows just opened at the Musée Bourdelle, looking at Balenciaga's work in black, because of course that was a sort of big focus for his collections. Natascha, I know you're a big Balenciaga fan.
Yeah, well, I think Balenciaga is one of, I suppose, like an insider in fashion, and really, I suppose it is all about the work and the skill and the cutting and proposing a different story. And it's interesting looking back to some of the pieces that are being written about him as this sort of outsider and rebel, because when you look at the classic pieces and the classic photos, that's not the idea that you would necessarily get. But I think it's always interesting with these brands to see, because Balenciaga famously closed the house, didn't he, and was like there's no one left to dress. So in a way, you wonder what he would then feel about the brand coming back. And obviously it's an interesting moment to look at that.
What do we think of the kind of codes of Balenciaga, thinking about back to those days?
I think it's all about the cut, the construction and perfection in making.
He really eliminated the waist and exaggerated the shoulders. He did a lot of tunic dresses in the 50s. Yeah, he was just the king of couture. I think when he died in the 70s, they said he was the last string of elegance really left in fashion. So when he did die, I think that was kind of a big pivotal moment. And people didn't really
I think I read a story about him having dinner with someone and their sleeve wasn't set correctly, so he took it out and reset it, which is really lovely. Because that's the sort of thing that would annoy me, to be honest.
And when he died,
was an obsessive, though. I mean, his whole life was dedicated to his work and sort of tearing garments apart if he felt they weren't resolved. So yeah, it was all. And I think the silhouette is a very key thing there. Although they look very voluminous, he often used a lot of corsetry inside the garments to shape them. But the other interesting thing too is that he's very much, in terms of age, his women were kind of older than the usual client, and he was very happy with that. He was happy to sort of dress women of different ages. So he was always looking at solving problems too. So it wasn't just somebody who was 6 foot tall and very young. So again, that's unusual in fashion. I think is another element.
I mean, speaking about solving problems, he kind of created his own fabrics as well, did he not? Working with kind of very things that would sit on the body.
Yeah, he created a special silk gazar, and he worked very closely with Abrahams, the
It was
textile
very
manufacturer.
architectural, like very sculptural pieces. I think he was kind of the first to explore that. Almost cocoon-like. The ladies were actually like encapsulated in the pieces and the dresses were built around them. Yeah, it was real couture. This is the real deal. I'm very excited for the exhibition coming up at the V&A. I think it will introduce a lot of these new customers at Balenciaga to what the real history and the heritage is behind the brand. So I think it'll be quite interesting, the response, to see how people react to what they know as Balenciaga now and what the actual history is. Yeah, it's coming up in May, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exciting.
I think his personality was interesting as well, because, as you say, he was quite withdrawn. I suppose I'm trying to think of the right word for it, but in that world where he was catering to a very small group of women and also dealing with a very small group of female editors who were sort of writing about and dictating fashion, it kind of worked to play hard to get. And when you read those reports from that time, women were obsessed with getting into this show. The shows were always up several flights of stairs. Everything was kind of hard. If you were late, you didn't get in. The Balenciaga story.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing though with that too is actually secretly he was actually working with department stores, which is also, you know, again, one of these things that's come out from recent research that we've done, that, you know, his was working with Harrods. They were producing a Balenciaga line, and that would be, you know, they would go to the show, they would pay their, you know, buy the designs, and then they would be made up in-house in London, but with the Balenciaga label. So it's interesting, that moment that you were talking about, where couture is looking towards ready-to-wear and how they're sort of branching out, and how the clothes can be more accessible and bring in, you know, more revenue in a way. So there's sort of lots of stories about him that, in a way, at the time, were created this sort of mystique and the untouchable character, which I think, you know, drove a lot of the sort of interest in him too.
And there was, I mean, it was I suppose the clothes themselves weren't necessarily political, but Balenciaga's history brings in the Spanish Civil War, and he began with a label called Isa. I think you've handled some of those old garments.
Stuff he was
as well.
making for the royal family in Spain at the time, before he actually introduced Balenciaga, his own label, and they're incredible. The construction of those pieces. And you see a lot of what he was doing then filter into what he did later on.
His sort of trajectory is interesting too, because early on it's a lot more frou-frou, a lot of his earlier work, and you can see him developing towards his later stage, and we think of that sort of almost religious, monastic type of silhouette, so and things like that. And I think, you know, that in that period is sort of, again, an interesting position, and very much drew a lot of his inspiration from the Catholic Church, but also from his Spanish heritage. And Hamish Bowles did a great exhibition a few years ago. It was in the De Young Museum in San Francisco, and that also looked very much at the Spanish heritage too. So they were sort of things that he returned to again and again, I think, as a sort of source of inspiration.
And then moving on to Guesquier, that's a kind of fashion favourite, Guesquier for Balenciaga, very well received, very fondly looked back on, as I alluded to at the beginning of the panel. How do we feel that, we were talking a little bit about how that relates to Demna's work, and how these are kind of people with very strong visions. Do you see those two things as related?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to sort of see a link, maybe, but is that idea of sort of almost a provocateur, or someone who's pushing something outside of fashion. I mean, Balenciaga in the 50s, he took himself off the fashion calendar and said, I'm not dealing with this anymore, I'll show when I'm ready, you know, which is quite a statement, and he still, you know, had the adoring clientele. So, and then I think with Guesquier, I mean, his work was incredible. It wasn't sort of towing the line in fashion at the time. It was always a different proposal and something quite strange and interesting. And maybe, you know, that's whether you love it or hate it. I think with Vetements, they've really pushed something on and changed the landscape in a way. So it is that sort of provocative stance, and maybe outside of fashion, that if you're, you know, a lady who wants to dress, you know, in a nice fashionable look, you're not necessarily going to go to Balenciaga. That's for sort of stronger personalities, I think, in a way. I mean, I don't know.
I think what was interesting with his time there was that he actually had a good run, what, 15 years or whatever, and those first few years he really wasn't super on the radar, so he kind of got to work through, if you look at those early collections, it is just very much mainly black and sort of very, very plain lines, and then he suddenly starts to kind of build what he's about and what he wants Balenciaga to be. So that kind of luxury of time, which probably Elbaz had at Lanvin as well, really seems to kind of help, because then he got to the point where he's like, this is Balenciaga, and then he really just evolved that very organically for the rest of his time there.
Can we bring up maybe his second collection? I think would have been Spring Summer 98 or something like that, just as a reference for that.
Like fetch me 98.
Yeah.
Immediately.
I think looking back, Gasquet's body of work as well, you realise how much of what he was doing at the time seemed strange, but it dripped and trickled down into mainstream, you know, high street so quickly. And I guess with Demna as well, you see a lot of what he's doing at Balenciaga now being reflected, even in Mulberry and, you know, these other shows, the whole style, the aesthetic of what he's doing being trickled down also. So you could see similarities there, I guess.
I suppose I always saw the appointment of Demna as a kind of similar to the appointment of Wang, in that it was a very kind of commercial move, and again someone who is quite interested in sportswear. So I sort of greeted it quite cynically. Charlotte, I want to bring you in as you haven't spoken yet.
I know. So I think the casting that Cristobal did, often he would cast kind of like quite strange looking models, and I think that could be quite a nice link to Demna and what he's doing. He's mentioned that before in terms of like his it girls being quite strange, or like one of them was quoted as in the 50s like running down the catwalk with a grumpy face, and that's very like Lotte Volkova. So in that sense there's similarities, and he said he's tried to, with the necklines, like emulate the kind of the exposing the cleavage, or, you know, delicately, and he's done it with his puffer jackets instead. So there is, I think he's trying to replicate the Balenciaga woman, but like you say, the social commentary and the kind of Cristobal, I don't think is necessarily reflected in quite the same way, because I think the commercial aspect of it has to take precedence, which it has. I mean, very successfully.
And it's interesting because Demna says that he's not interested in commerciality.
Yeah.
I mean, when I hear him say, I just want to make clothes, all I hear is, I just want to sell clothes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what he really means. I
think that's what he says. I mean, it would be interesting to quiz him on that, because he's saying, I want to see people wear my clothes. I'm all about the product. And yet says, I'm not about commerciality, and I don't want to make what the market wants. But it's kind of about, actually, marketing's about making what people want, finding out what they want and need. So I think that's an interesting.
I think he's like from the inside, trying like the humour. I don't know. I always like grapple with like, is it funny or is the irony there? Or because he's on the inside and it sells so well, like what is the joke and how far is the joke
I would love
going?
if it were funny, but it's humorless. It's very humorless and ironic. And I find it very, it creates a real distance for me when I look at the clothes, because it doesn't have a kind of humor to it. I enjoy people being playful with the codes of fashion and deconstructing things, absolutely. But there's something so sort of cold and ironic when I see them. I feel a bit depressed.
I think
really,
it's like it's too cynical, because it's so, the tropes are so obvious, like DHL t-shirt, like obviously let's not go there, but like it's too blatant. So I don't think there's enough of a twist, like, oh, it's a comment on capitalism. Is it?
I think it's funny because Vetements actually sells for more than Balenciaga.
Right.
So, and there's a huge kind of, contradiction there. I mean, I feel like it's just now a diluted version of Vetements. It's Balenciaga is, yeah. It's just another outlet for his consumer base to go to, people that are obsessed with brands and logos. I mean, they don't really know.
Who is that customer? I'm quite interested in this because I remember recently at a presentation seeing a very, well put together, skinny, young, blonde, fashionista girl, and she was wearing these Vetements Reebok athletic socks with a high heel, and I could just tell she thought that was the epitome of kind of anti-establishment fashion, but I could never see that same girl just doing that of her own volition. It was something she needed to be told, now I can wear athletic socks with a high heel because that's in right now.
I mean, it was in for like 5 minutes. I don't think necessarily now if I saw someone wearing that, I would think, wow, this person's the height of fashion, as to what you would associate Balenciaga to be associated with. So I feel it was complete opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of the clientele they were trying to push for against the reality of it. But it just comes down to the styling and a lot of the logo placements and the reference to sportswear. It's empowering the underdog in a way.
Yeah, I feel a lot of it is the styling, and it is playing dress up with just taking pieces from 70s, 80s, 90s and styling them and saying here's a new vision, but it isn't specifically a new vision.
I'd personally rather go to a vintage market and buy a pair of Levi jeans than them myself. It would just seem way more authentic, and I think now there's quite a violent quest for identity, the sense that these people are trying so hard to be different, and but these are people that would never go into a vintage shop, the people that would buy this stuff, so it's just giving them access to look as if they would go into a vintage shop and dress this way.
And you're quite right, the point about being inside something, it's quite difficult to be counterculture when you are culture.
I don't think you can be if you're at this level of commerciality. It doesn't
make sense.
Even though, they do the off-key locations, or they'll make people sit on the office chairs instead of like a plush seat. Like, that's not enough. I just find that.
I think to give it also this very corporate political edge, when they say it really has no political meaning behind it.
Well, exactly.
I mean, it's.
Well, I wanted to bring up the Bernie Sanders logo that was used.
Yeah.
And that's the that epitomizes to me their kind of lame politics, which is very kind of wishy-washy, based in kind of more just kind of meme culture, or just kind of throwaway
lots
politics.
Lots of the stories are really media, the whole thing is a media story, isn't it? It's like, I've packaged up my press release story for you, and this is an easy thing for someone to pick and make a quick headline.
Right, exactly.
You don't need to think about this. You don't need to work out the references because I'm just going to give them to you, maybe.
I think it's also important to note that maybe Demna doesn't even know the real references himself. He could be going through Tumblr and seeing these kind of
it feels like that, because
together.
That Bernie Sanders logo came at a time when Bernie was not. I mean, it was before. It was sort of.
Everyone was doing this.
Trump had been
patches.
elected, I think. And it was just a kind of very. I don't know. It wasn't charged with a real politics. It was kind of a post. It was just felt very ironic and sort of not grounded in an actual political voice.
But hasn't everyone done that this season? Not everyone, but there's been a whole load of pussy hats and statement t-shirts and stuff, but everyone's sort of trying, and press releases, and everyone's tried to kind of say in a very fluffy way, we're sad, sort of whatever the message is. So I get that it's whatever it is, and he's just probably playing with the recognition of that shape, but it does seem to be the thing that everyone has.
Well, let's bring up Dior, because it reminds me of those kind of we are all feminists, and it's just so embarrassing. I just find that, it's just, and that last Dior collection was, anyway.
Even the font.
But again, that's the
even the font.
They use the same font, I think it is. It's Bebus. It's a typeface.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's very hipster. It was everywhere in East London, in bars and
Yeah.
You weren't
Yeah,
feeling
that's the
it.
t-shirt.
Not at all.
I mean,
It
I
looks-
just think that's not only a low point in fashion, but a low point in politics.
Low point in t-shirt design as
A
well.
low point in t-shirt design.
I don't see how a t-shirt is going to make everyone into
Yeah.
feminists.
But it's jumping on the, it's fashionable. Therefore, that, sadly, that's a sort of.
Well, I want to know
fashionable
why is this fashionable? Why is a Bernie Sanders logo or a "We should all be feminist" t-shirt
I think
fashionable
a
right
few
now?
younger people are waking up to politics, aren't they, in a way that we've been a bit politics free for quite a long time. I've certainly felt sad about that if I think about my own time being a student and going on demos and marches
Right,
and
right,
caring
right.
about things very passionately.
Yeah.
And I've kind of not seen that existing. So I think it's really nice that younger people are quite politicised. And I guess maybe people don't know how to do that except in a I've got to be on Instagram way.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is a
I
really
think
easy
it's-
way
I think Instagram
to
does
do
play a
that.
lot in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a visual thing.
Yeah, because there's no words involved,
Yeah.
so an image can assume a lot of different things. So
And it's been part of something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there might be really important things about it, but it's a pity if a designer can't be more sophisticated about what feminism even means.
It's the media identifier, like identity identifier, basically. So you can say I care about these things and I'm not part of the
But-
mainstream, but I am.
yeah.
But it's not even just fashion, I suppose. When I look at recent demonstrations, it's actually people used to make placards with really powerful messages. And now it's all about making a joke and getting that photo on the web, and that goes viral.
Yeah.
And somehow that is how we've gotten to
And I
protesting
think the
these
feminist
days.
thing, as well, we talked about it on the last panel. I mean, fashion has so many lovely, amazing, fun things, but has a really awful, seedy undercurrent, and lots of women work in fashion, lots of women making garments are really badly treated, etc.
Yeah.
So if some fashion houses wanted to deal with feminist perspective, I mean, let's talk about those things more clearly. Let's kind of surface some of those issues.
Precisely. Hear, hear.
Yay! I've got a placard. I made a.
I mean, going into politics, or I kind of wanted to bring up representational politics. That comes up a lot with Vetements and Balenciaga, although the show is just about to start, so maybe we'll kind of segue into looking at the show while that happens. Casting comes up a lot with them.
Their
And-
casting directors just got fired.
Yeah, that was.
Yes,
yeah,
so models being locked in under staircases for 3 hours in the dark. How do we all feel about that?
Wow.
Allegedly.
Sadly, it's actually not surprising.
No, I wasn't
that,
surprised at all.
And they weren't actually locked in, but it should.
When I read that story, I thought, yeah, that's fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's something about the current climate where we're kind of trying to take that image away and be very revolted by this type of stuff. But to me, racism and being very horrible to models is all kind of part of what fashion's been about in the 21st century.
It's bad.
Let's have a look at the clothes.
So there's the laundry bag is back out.
Yeah.
Kind of cape thing. One-armed.
I mean, we talked about a kind of older woman that Balenciaga was initially dressing. I always see a kind of an older woman in these clothes, or at least it's a young interpretation of
Yeah.
those original kind of floral aprons, or this kind of mumsy, or kind of almost folksy.
Yeah, I think there's a folk element. It's interesting with the prints and patterns, very sort of, again, drawing on his heritage in a way, sort of, but making a joke because it's not really something you see necessarily associated with high fashion. Again, that's sort of irony. So it's interesting.
I wonder if the coats have just been styled that way, or they're actually functioning that way.
It looks like they're constructed like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It looks like they're buttoned in. The sort of the boot, the legging boot is kind of
It
interesting.
doesn't seem to be much progression from any of the other shows.
Isn't that the thing with him, that he's kind of, it almost feels like for this he's come out going, this is what Balenciaga's going to be, and season to season the colours might change a little bit, but this is pretty much what you're going to get.
I feel so sad for makeup this season.
This is looking very toned. So it's looking quite wearable and more like a traditional customer, I think. You know, these kind of blouses and skirts. Like obviously the coats were the statement at the start, but it seems in a way the edges come off a bit. I don't know. I just think that silk blouse was quite.
Seems to be even more officey, corporate.
And is this a garment bag with clothes in that they're carrying, or?
Looks like it.
I've got to say, I've always been very critical, but I am actually enjoying this show.
Oh,
I think it looks more grown up.
Yeah.
Feels a bit more calculated.
It seems like more of a, more mature. More sophisticated. I don't know. Like a lot of the really kind of kitschy, bright colours that were in some of them, to me only looked good when Lota was wearing them. She sort of carried them off so well, and I didn't really see other women in them particularly.
I do like the choice of colour.
But the colours in this are great.
Yeah, that teal and the olive green. It's nice.
And it does seem to be differentiating itself from Vetements slightly more. I know we touched on that earlier, that they're very, very similar.
Although there is a ski jacket again.
Well, as I say, with a headscarf.
With a kind of
Queen Mum headscarf. Music's good.
I mean, every look has that same boot, that very skinny, pointed heel.
They're like spandex, I think. Like tights.
It's that floral print.
I mean, there's like a look for every fashion editor, isn't there?
I mean, will these looks kind of really stand out on a rail as much as some of their other stuff, or some of the Vetements stuff does kind of hit you when you look at it in person?
I suppose it depends on selection, really. Like, you know, there's the kind of luminous blouse just seen, and I don't know, and that silver skirt that came out seemed to have an imprint of like a metal flooring, kind of. So it's sort of still little off-kilter things. But
I do think their clothes work much better on models. I mean, rather than on the rail.
I mean, you don't see it on an Oscars red carpet.
no.
For good reason. I don't know, I think compared to the first collection, there's not as many statement pieces.
No, this is
It
very
feels very layered and wearable, like you can mix and match, but I wouldn't say that they would necessarily stand out to me.
But
or
it's
be
interesting
distinctive.
how the sort of, as you were saying, Tom, like the codes are being announced in a way. It's almost kind of now self-referential, sort of. Maybe it's not going to move on dramatically. Maybe this is it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in some ways he is definitely sticking to codes. I heard that he's also took a lot of brooches from the archives of the last collection. Really old ones, and would just put them on the looks of the models, which I kind of liked. I think it's refreshing. They're having fun with it. They're doing their thing. It's kind of corporate, but tongue-in-cheek. I don't know.
They're certainly pushing accessories.
Yeah, it's probably one of their biggest sellers.
Yeah.
Goodness.
The wash bag.
Woohoo! Excellent. I mean, matching is always something that people try and avoid. I think being too matchy.
Yeah.
And they've kind of revived this. I don't know where it comes from, but a kind of matchy type thing.
Some of these gowns look very
That's very,
reminiscent.
yeah, that is.
It's that sort of 80s
Yeah.
reference, I think, with the matchy and also
Yeah.
the
Right.
gowns
And the
sort
neon
of,
colours.
yeah. But that's like an original Balenciaga. It looks like, you know, the fabric and the print. It's
Yeah, and that ball
definitely
gown was
referencing.
now. All these seem to be.
Extreme, like A-line.
I think that's pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
Just
I
so
think this
graphic.
is what I was hoping to see
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
the more they progress.
That's, that's great. Yeah, I wasn't expecting such strong references to
No.
Cristobal Balenciaga.
It's an important year, isn't it, for them to catch
Yeah.
the media attention
Yeah.
with your exhibition and things going on. They're being under
Yeah.
story, so then it's good to make those links, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just surprised that he did in a way.
Yeah.
It's got, yeah,
I'm into the bag with the feathers.
Yeah,
That's
same.
fantastic.
yeah.
I mean, a lot of these looks are less kind of Instagram ready, but they're much more interesting to kind of talk about from a fashion point of view.
She's got her little card.
Are they
for the-
seat number cards?
I
Is
think
that what
it's
the reference
in
is?
reference to Balenciaga because his models
Would
in
always
the
carry the
display
numbers.
carry the
Ah, I
numbers.
see, I
so,
see.
Yeah.
Well, there we go.
Interesting.
I think there was just a lot less sense of irony in that
Yeah.
show,
It was
and
a
I
lot
really
more-
enjoyed that.
I mean, the music doesn't help. It's kind of like American Psycho.
But it just seems a bit more grown up.
But they've had some staffing changes, haven't they, as well, in terms of management. And I think with Caring, I mean, obviously luxury's kind of been slowing down and struggling. And I think for these brands, they really need to make their own story, don't they? So maybe that's why the separation has to be, doesn't it? It's like you could bring the Vetements story with you to get the buzz, but then you kind of need to have something new
Yes.
to say at
Yeah.
Balenciaga. Otherwise, what is Balenciaga for?
I think that's what I was worried about from seeing all the previous collections. But this makes me think that there is a real woman that they're imagining,
Yeah.
not just a kind
Yeah.
of jumble of
Almost as
you-
though they were marketing.
Say again?
Almost as though they were marketing to a customer.
Imagine that.
It's good to see they've looked like they've had a bit of fun in the archives.
Yeah.
And, you know, instead of just making sweatshirts and puffer
Yeah.
jackets,
I love that. I think
it's
Right.
a bit more refreshing.
I'm very glad there was only one ski jacket, but I could have done without any ski jackets personally.
this could be your red carpet. These could be your Hollywood dresses.
These are, I want the ostrich, is it ostrich feathers or what was that?
Marabou maybe. I don't know.
Now I hope Demna's
the
wearing one
fabrics
of
look
those
really
gowns,
nice.
that's what I want to see. I want to see him decked out in ostrich and with a massive bag that trips him over. Or not, or no appearance at all maybe.
Oh.
Look at that. Well, there we go.
Wow.
I mean, I always find it strange, I suppose, touching on how Demna dresses. Demna always picks up like the hoodies and the t-shirts, like the t-shirt that says t-shirt and the hoodie that says hoodie, and you know, sneakers and very simple stuff. And there's a lot of like really kind of bizarre suiting that he does for men. And I suppose I always wanted to see him wearing that kind of stuff. I wanted to see him be more of his own client. I always
Yeah.
like when designers wear their own stuff
stuff.
and look very outrageous and fabulous.
I think it's important to reflect your own vision as a
And that's what I
designer.
really enjoy about Lotus. She always walks out in Balenciaga and looks amazing.
She seems to be more the face, really, if anything.
Yeah, but very few designers do proportionally
Yeah.
wear their own clothes, unfortunately. You know.
Yeah.
But he said that's why he has her, doesn't he? Because he's like, well, she's going to wear the thigh-high boot. I'm not going to be able to wear that.
He
But-
should wear the thigh-high boot as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, the models always look like they have a hard time walking in those boots.
Yeah.
And with huge bags, it's also
Yeah.
a really difficult task.
Balancing act.
I mean, I do like seeing models struggling a bit.
Oh.
What, emotionally, or
I don't know, it seems quite honest, really, to like fashion that.
So what was this casting director story? Because I didn't hear about it.
So James Scully, who's a casting director on Business and Fashion last year, said like that this needs to change, and if it doesn't change, I'm going to name and shame the people who I'm talking about because the conditions are terrible. Then he did an Instagram post, then named and shamed the Balenciaga casting directors, who then said actually it wasn't our fault, it was because this was the facilities that we were given, blah, blah, blah. But then a model who was there then retorted back saying, no, they were in the dark for 3 hours in the staircase. Whether they were like locked in or not is
When I read that story, it's like, come on, like, you know, the fashion industry is still using slave labor in the third world. And we're going to talk about some models who are left in the dark for a bit and kind of cleanse ourselves.
It's probably not the first time it's happened either.
No, that surely happens all the time.
Yeah.
It did slightly smack of taking down the competition. in
Yeah,
one
there was a
sense,
bit of
but
that.
I do think it's fair enough that yes, there are bigger problems in the fashion industry, but still, it's worth looking at it and not saying, oh, it's okay that they're treated badly because other people are treated badly too. So I think it's important that
hopefully
that is.
it's the start of like incremental changes which will have a trickle down effect. I would hope. I mean, that's being optimistic, but.
And of course, they've been slammed for their casting before for using all white casts on more than one occasion.
It seemed more mixed, I think. I mean, there was a bit more diversity, I guess.
I think it's always tricky kind of demanding that people use models of colour when perhaps designers don't really know exactly how to interpret or to dress someone with a kind of sensitivity to black issues. I don't think Balenciaga or Demna really has a very strong idea of black issues.
I think now you can't escape the fact that that you are making a statement by what you do or what you don't do. And it's not necessarily about black or white. I mean, it is just about having difference, isn't it? So I think that's
And also
it's
being
difficult to
aware.
kind of excuse yourself because you are doing a casting, you're making a decision, and I mean these women have they all have the same shape. But they look, so I mean even things around that and age, all of those things are really being scrutinised at the moment. So you couldn't really pretend that you didn't know that was a decision that you were making.
But it's very now to really interrogate that, isn't it? Because we're so obsessed with identity.
Yeah. But then it's, again, if you're being a feminist, let's think about these are all women modelling in the show. So again, how they're treated, how they're represented, even how you're picking. I mean, they're all decisions that they're making about the brand. And I imagine the luxury brand they want to sell into Asia, so they have some Asian faces modelling.
I know, it's that though, it's that kind of thing where it's like, we'll do that, it's to sell, isn't it? And it's to look respectable, and I just...
I think so much of what they perceive as their ideal customer is so far away from what they, could imagine their real customer being. So, I don't know, I think you've also got to be aware as a designer, your work's going out there to thousands, millions of people. It's up to you to have that responsibility to as well be fair and
especially being
equal.
part of the caring group, because they're talking a lot about sustainability and the way forward and the future fashion, and they've produced their new model, and they're thinking not just about textiles and sustainability, but about kind of the whole ethics of the business. So if you're operating under that umbrella, then each of the brands has got to then say, how does that work with us? What's our response to that challenge?
And you'd think they'd be concerned with that since they put Kering on a huge jumper, didn't they, on one of the last shows?
Yes.
It was their menswear show, they did that, which apparently wasn't a statement.
Do we have any kind of standout favourite looks?
I like the dresses at the end. I think
Yeah, I
they
think
were
just the dresses for me.
It was a very split show though, because the first half I was kind of going, that's basically Mulberry, just because that's what I've seen quite recently, and obviously that's where there is a slight starting connection, because it is a bit softer than what he's shown at Balenciaga before, and then you've got a kind of a greatest hits dress collection, which seems quite different. So
I'd be interested to see how much of it is actually also on sale, because I was on their website recently and the choice was very fair and few.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like these twisted, tailored pieces are kind of editorial pieces up there.
Yeah.
But if you actually wanted to buy something, you'd probably buy something a bit later on.
Yeah.
Rather than just twisted and then you just unbutton the button the right way in there.
Yes.
I think their stuff always does good editorially.
Yeah.
But it's interesting at the start because these to me are very vêtements, you know, as a statement, the twisted coat, but at the end it's very Balenciaga. You know, it's that sort of, it morphs slightly away through, I think. We're sort of making the statement of this is who we are, but at the end it's incredibly referential to the originals. So. And they stand up. I mean, they look really strong. I don't think they look sort of retrospective or out of place at the moment.
That's kind of the weird thing, isn't it, about, and I know every time you look at kind of a show that's by a legacy brand or whatever you want to call it, it's like how do you define its success? Is it successful when Guespier sort of made it into something completely different? Is it successful when it goes completely referential? How do you
get the balance?
When is it good? When is it bad? How do you sort of judge it really? And this does seem to fall between, and you almost think, yes, those shapes are amazing, but wouldn't you like just to have the original rather than have a reissue? It's a bit like Holston and kind of, you know, all that kind of heritage stuff. So I don't totally know if, well, I get they're really nice to look at.
But then again, it goes for Balenciaga's new customer how much they actually know themselves about the heritage of the brand. So for them to see those dresses at the end would be some revolutionary concept, when if they knew the history, they'd know that probably a lot of those are probably copied to a T.
Well,
some of them look very familiar to me.
I mean, I think they definitely reference, but I think the shapes, they are a new take
the
on
voluptuous,
they're sort of
balloon-esque, it's great.
And shoulders always feature heavily. Shoulder pads, American football kind of bulked out shoulders. I always find it a bit distressing when we return to shoulder padded women. I thought women didn't have to kind of put on big shoulder padded suits to be powerful, but this is a kind of return to that. Or it has been. I guess it's a slightly softer shoulder this time, but still accentuated.
I mean, that was key for him as well. He used to do that a lot, exaggerate the shoulders and.
But maybe in not such a hard way, because I think it was a very smooth, voluminous sleeve, as opposed to a sort of
a rounded,
as opposed to that square line that you get. Yeah,
it feels like 80s revamp, and the floral prints.
Is this a sort of powerful modern woman?
I feel like lots of these looks we're looking at now, that's what people are wearing.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be challenging for people to wear. That would be really easily understood.
It'll be interesting to see how much of it trickles as well into high street Zara, and you know, it's going to be inevitable.
I mean, I feel like some of this can easily happen in Topshop and Zara pretty quickly. Like
it might look even better.
Although I'm not sure, some of those looks that I think are very wearable, I'm not sure how they're almost not interesting enough to then be the Topshop or Zara version, because there wouldn't be a distinctive thing to go, oh, that's that Balenciaga.
Well, you could do like a bright, you could do a very bright stocking pointed heel, and you could
You'd have to style it,
a big, you would, but you could do like a big shopping bag, and you could do a t-shirt with a shoulder in it. And you
Are you proposing this?
I am, yes. Actually, yes. I've been working for Arcadia for quite a while.
Yeah, but I think you're right. A lot is in the fabrics. When you see
I'd like to see the fabrics in person.
Yeah.
One thing that feels quite new to me is this in 21, this waist. I can't really see the image very well because I'm a bit far away, but I mean, he's always done belts, like the kind of very Margiela-esque belts with the circular loops, and this seems like a new
take on that.
I mean, she's kind of giving you a bit of camel toe. I don't know if that's intentional. It's very, you know, you can see the crotch.
I think a lot of it's meant to look quite ill-fitted, or like it's quite dishevelled. thrown over. I think anything that's meant to look like a mistake is probably just there. But I don't think it's down to good tailoring necessarily.
I mean, there was some of that in the menswear, the last Balenciaga menswear, kind of very ill-fitting trousers as well.
Yeah.
Doesn't
They were quite
Martine
drop
do
Do you think
the?
it's intentional? Charlotte, jump in.
Doesn't Martine do the menswear
Yes.
for Balenciaga? So I feel like I think it's really. I just love Martine Rose. I feel like she should do the main one. I think it would be brilliant, and I think also, like what her and Max Pirmaine have been doing for a long time is now reflected here in a slightly more commercial way.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of similarities between those two duos.
And how does this kind of show stand against some of the other things you've seen in Paris? I mean, did anyone have any favourite shows in Paris?
I like the Dries Van Noten show, but I do always quite like Dries Van Noten.
I do always quite like
Yeah.
Dries Van Noten, but I didn't like that show.
Oh, why not?
No, you go first. You go.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's just nice to. I just like the print and stories. I just think they're just visually they're really appealing. They're also really lovely on a screen when you're looking, you know, which is the way often we're looking at fashion now, isn't it?
Right.
So they're kind of backlit and on the screen. So I just, yeah.
I suppose we're just in a period where the wheels are kind of spinning, really, and that's why probably everyone's latched onto Vetements as
Yes.
a great new hope, because not just in fashion but architecture everywhere, there's a kind of a gap. No one really knows how to deal with what's happening, whether it's politics or, you know, resources or sustainability or whatever. So it does feel like people are just experimenting slightly different routes of what they normally do, rather than anything really distinctive coming out, I guess. So it hasn't felt, there's been some really nice shows which have felt like nice iterations of
Yeah.
shows from a few seasons back.
Seeing your old favourites again.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the Vetements panel that we did here, and I think we ended up describing it as a sort of fashion purgatory, this sort of no man's land that we're in, kind of fills that gap very nicely, of a kind of very kind of, you know,
Because it feels opinionated.
difficult
even
world.
if
Say again,
Because
sorry.
it feels opinionated even if it isn't. It
Right,
feels
right,
like
right. Anyone else have any other favourite shows from Paris, and how does it stand in Paris? Oh my goodness,
I can't
that's
say I've
damning.
I
That's
can't say I've watched it.
absolutely damning. Well, I'm going to say I love the Saint Laurent show, and I just want to talk about it lots, because our panel on Saint Laurent was so rude about it, and I thought it was genius. And I hate Vaccarello, but I thought it was so fantastic. Sorry, I'm just going to start talking about Saint Laurent now.
Well, they're part of the Kering group, so
Yeah, indeed. Yes, that's my. That's
bring
what
it
I
in
meant.
that way.
Yeah.
I quite like Saint Laurent.
I just am so glad that we have scrunch boots. I am so happy for the return.
But I think
Well,
Eddie must be
Scrunch boots.
furious because it's just a continuation, pretty much, of what he was kind of doing.
I think there's a lot of Anthony Vaccarello in there.
I think this is Vaccarello to a T, but I
Yeah.
think he's finally.
But it looks very
found-
Versace what he was doing, like Versus.
I think
Yeah.
he's latched onto that thing of that he just needs to sell a few killer things each season, and he's just making sure that you don't miss that. You know, so,
Right.
So
But then again,
that
I don't
bit is
think the
gonna be-
consumer of Saint Laurent really cares who the creative director is.
You don't think a lot of consumers care about fashion, James?
Well, I think the people that buy it and the people that have the money for these things don't necessarily look into it the way we look into it. That it's
Right.
just quite a vast, vapid thing for them. They just go out and buy it. I
Yeah, and
don't
also you were
think.
talking about how like the hanger appeal and how things
Yeah.
look in
Right,
the
right,
store, and often when people are
Because we're all
buying,
talking about this
that's-
quite intellectually, but how many of us are actually going to go out and buy it? You know, I think that's what it comes down to.
Can you scroll back up again? One of my favourite looks is this one on the far left. Okay, now, let me say why.
Yeah, I think you need to. You need to say why.
We do
okay.
a lot of talk, especially around
Okay.
Vetements and Balenciaga, about dressing the street, or dressing how people already dress, or dressing for the kind of everyday woman. And that, to me, is the everyday woman right there. When I saw that, that's the epitome of the everyday woman.
It's very J-Lo.
It is very J-Lo
it's
in
very
her like
J-Lo.
LL Cool J era.
But that's not a bad thing.
No, I love
I'm into
J-Lo.
that.
I think that look is fantastic. It's just the everyday woman.
Yeah.
An everyday woman wears scrunch boots.
But is that what you want?
That's what I
And
want.
that kind of brown
Yeah.
denim, that brown leather with the denim, that combo, the cashmere.
I can tell I'm not conversing. many people
Well,
at the panel.
It's
Thank
quite
you,
90s.
Sparrow.
What you got with it as well is, and this brings back to Balenciaga a bit, is I know people that work with Yves Saint Laurent in the retail side, and the customer who was shopping there years ago shopped right through the Slimane area and era and is still shopping with Vaccarello. So
Yeah.
that lady just buys Saint Laurent, and I'm sure is aware that the designers has changed, but it's just gone and gone. Cool boot, I like that.
Yeah.
And so I think we see a lot of the kind of ups and downs and the it's in, it's out, the drama. And I think where those brands have just built up that kind of equity over so long, I'm interested in how, because I think Alexander Wang was actually quite commercially successful.
Yeah.
At Balenciaga. And I don't know how these guys are doing it, but it is interesting that at a certain point, the name over the door
Yeah, if it's your
becomes
brand.
enough, and then
Yeah.
everything else is the noise that we all create about it.
But there is, I suppose, I mean, certainly with Hedi, he was doing so much to kind of make the brand just him, and taking Eve out, and really being a very powerful creative director, in the same way as like someone like Alessandro Michele might do, where it's just really suddenly like, this is me, I'm here. You know, whether people know the name or not, you get a feeling in the store, or you get a feeling from the campaign imagery that's very strong. So I feel people do get a sense of that shift. I feel like seeing Hedi's campaigns versus Vaccarello's campaigns, it's like, I don't know. I
quite
think
like
that
the roller
customer
blades.
I'm not sure, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
I do think, that there's whole degrees, I don't want to say literacy, but there are degrees to which people really, like, they'll see a black and white ad from Saint Laurent.
Yeah,
And yes,
yeah.
it's a bit sharper or a bit fuzzier, but that's...
Yeah.
Yeah, and thinking about where they're positioned and where they're sold and how people are sold into them. That lots of that isn't changing. The location of the store
Yes.
isn't changing. All of those things. So if we think about who is buying at this level,
Yeah.
they're kind of coming into that same experience, and someone is guiding them to the pieces that are going to match them. And as you say, they've identified with that brand, and they see themselves as the Saint Laurent woman.
Yeah.
So as long as they can find the piece that they want, then they're still, that's kind of going back to their identity with the brand again. That's what brands want, isn't it? Which is why maybe with the Balenciaga now they're going, actually we need that to be a different mood, because we've already got the Vetements woman over here, and now we want the Balenciaga woman.
Does the Wang Balenciaga woman, how does she respond to?
I
think she just goes,
She's disappeared.
But I think it's that thing, as you were saying, of the woman being able to find a piece every season or something. And I think the Wang was very easy to buy and to wear. Maybe it wasn't a statement like the other designers, but...
Because I think Gasquet had already positioned Balenciaga roughly in where it is in the market. So as long as they keep sort of within a certain sort of channel of that.
Yeah.
I mean, as much as I thought that Demna's appointment was a kind of similar eye to commerciality as the Wang appointment, I feel like the Gasquet Balenciaga woman would certainly buy.
Or would be open to it.
Yeah. Well, I think that concludes our Balenciaga panel. Unfortunately, we've got an image of that up to end. Maybe we can end with something even more fabulous. Actually, you know what I really wanted to talk about was Lotta's own label. Sorry, this is a bit of a pet favourite of mine, but she used to have this really fantastic label called Skeletrix.
is it the denim thing?
And to me, this is just absolutely fabulous. So maybe this will play us out.
From SHOWstudio.
Oh my god! Oh my goodness! Oh no!
That's a great post.
Oh good! Oh my goodness! How unexpected! Thank you so much, Nick.
Thank you very much. Well done.
Oh wow! Well, thank you so much. It's been an honour, truly.